All right, welcome to Awakening Metaphysical Connections. This is our third episode. So I'm the
Yay.
Gail part.
And I'm the Kelly part.
So we're coming to you a little bit earlier than we normally come to you. I have some things that I have to do later tonight, but we didn't want to miss our podcast because we both have so much fun doing it. And I was just talking to Kelly before we got started that today, for those of you who celebrate Jewish holidays, is the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, or as I like to call it, At-One-ment. That day where you get to really be introspective and go within and look at like your sins for the year before and how you want to enter into the new year. So if you're watching us live on Facebook, say hi. You have to accept StreamYard for us to see your name. Otherwise, it's just going to say Facebook user on our end. So, Kelly, what do you want to talk about today?
Okay.
What?
I think the atonement thing and the one-ment thing is a great place to start.
Okay.
I think we've all had so much going on, and of course, the anniversary of 9/11 just passed. And people have been kind of frazzled and kind of all over the place. So this is a really good chance to just kind of settle and be at one, with yourself primarily. Right now, I think people need that. A lot of people, at least people that I've spoken with lately, seem a little lost, seem a little like they're not quite sure what they should be doing. I've had a number of people in the last couple of days ask me, what is this energy? It's making me go like this, So I think that's a wonderful place to start. It's just kind of calming people down.
What was the Three Musketeers saying? One for all and one for all?
And all for one.
And all for one. It's supposed to be one is all and all is one. They were close, but not exactly. Because every time, like my spirit team tells me, it's always one for all and all is one. And that was the difference in the two sayings. Yeah. And it's really cool when you start to think about
it. It is. And I think that's kind of missing from a lot of people and the way they look at things. Earlier today, I had someone telling me how this other person was the reason they were not happy in their life. And it's like, not exactly. That's not the way it works. So those kinds of things have been coming up a lot lately, especially since the big anniversary stuff of 9/11. Honestly, we should never forget that. It was a horrible thing. We need to always remember that. But at the same time, I think a whole bunch of people kind of got sucked back down that hole. And the feelings of, fear and nothing is going right and, woe is me and all of that stuff is really coming to the surface for a lot of people. So how do they deal with it? What would you tell people?
Ooh, I think, the therapist part of me wants to answer and say that we need to just practice being more mindful and staying in the present moment, because thinking about the future produces anxiety and thinking about the past produces depression. So the only thing that we actually have control over right now is the present moment. So when you deviate from that, it just produces so much one way or the other. And depression, most people don't think about it, but one of the ways that I always like to talk about it is depression is anger turned inward. So what are you really upset with yourself about? What are you really struggling with? What do you really need to work on in order to move forward in your life?
Right. I think a lot of people kind of get stuck there. I did a show the other day where we were kind of talking about how do you move forward? How do you get to the point where you're, okay, I'm ready to not live in this hole that I've been living in and go forward. And I think especially where 9/11 is concerned, a lot of people are kind of still stuck in that hole. They never kind of got out of that. And every time we revisit it as a society, as a country, a whole bunch of people kind of get stuck there again. Where I
Well,
live, a lot of people are military. So
mhm.
that's all I've heard about everywhere I go this week is that all over again.
Well, and I think it was a big anniversary too. And then the ending of the war in Afghanistan, 20 years later, it all corresponded to the same time. So there was just so much energy
Right.
going on that I think it's just really difficult.
Yeah.
So,
So
which,
with all of that in mind,
mhm.
how do we get to that one with all and all with one?
Well, I think it's whatever your practice is for you. Like some people take walks in nature, and for them, that's their connecting time. That's when they feel comfortable. That's where they feel safe. For other people, it's meditation. For some people, it's music. For me, it's creating mandalas. I find that to be my meditative state. And then I just get downloads of messages and channeled messages. So that's always fun as well. But I think it's going to look different for each person. And I think that's where people get into trouble. It's like, well, I just want the
Yes.
answer. So tell me how to do it. And there isn't one answer because it's going to be a process of trial and error, figuring out what works for you.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think we do tend to compare ourselves to other people and, well, this person did this, so I should do that. Not necessarily.
Mhm.
Um, and there are different forms of meditation. One form of meditation might not work for you. Um, Really, my meditation is drumming.
Mhm.
And I've had people say, well, you're supposed to sit and be still and be quiet. That's not me. I'm sorry, that's not me. So, like you said, the long walks can be in a very, put you in a very meditative state. That's
Mhm.
distant runners talk about that runner's high.
Mhm.
That's sort of a meditative state for them.
Yeah, that
Um,
being in the zone.
so Yes, yes. So often we hear about people who say, well, you should listen to this music and listen to this tone and this frequency. And lately, it seems like everyone all of a sudden is into frequencies. And
Mhm.
it's like they've always been there. Maybe this is new to a lot of people, but they have always been there. Um, Anyone who has ever listened to Buddhist chants can tell
Mhm.
you these frequencies have always been there. But if that's the latest and greatest thing, it seems like every couple months there is a different thing that everyone is supposed to be doing that's supposed to bring you all, to whatever level of enlightenment you're looking for. And really, no matter what you do externally, it's what
Mhm.
you do on the inside that counts. I don't know how much simpler to say that. So, what do you think? It seems like people are looking for the answers outside and they're not there.
Well, the way that I like to explain it is, because most cars or everyone at least is familiar with GPS systems where you plug in the coordinates and then
Mhm.
your car takes you to where you need to go or whatever way you're traveling. But we have our own internal GPS system. Most of us just don't know how to connect to it. And if we learn how to connect to that internal GPS or internal guidance, then we're going to get to where we need to go and we'll be much less stressed. But we're all looking for the answers externally versus internally because that's what we've been taught in our society. None of us have really been taught
How
how
do
to
we
go with
change?
what?
How do we change that?
Well, I think they're starting
You
to.
know,
Like I know in England, they're teaching kids meditation and stuff like that, like at 5, 6 years old, and how to really tune in. And I know some of the schools in the United States are using that method for detention for kids, who are in trouble. They're teaching that meditation and things like that. And all of that, teaching kids compassion would be amazing.
right, right.
Welcome,
Yeah,
welcome, Nicole. I don't know who the other
yeah.
user
There's
is.
somebody else on that. Right, right. It just says Facebook user.
Yeah.
I
So
know it's it seems like it might be getting better, but at the same time, and it might just be in the area that I'm in and the schools my grandkids go to, but it seems like there's still a lot of the same old things, the same old bullying that everybody's been fighting about forever, and the same old, well, she threw a rock at you because she really likes you. No, that's not showing someone you like them. And, those kinds of things are still going on. So I'm glad to hear that it's getting better in other places. I think maybe it's time that we take a look at our schools in the United States, because it might be happening somewhere, but I know it's not happening in most public schools.
well, and I think we're still trying to force kids into a very antiquated system of learning. I mean,
Right.
like the Zoom learning, I'm not saying everyone should go back to Zoom, because I think that was really stressful for parents and teachers and kids. But there's probably less bullying that went on over Zoom than there was in regular schools, just because they weren't in close
Probably.
proximity. And there was usually an adult on a Zoom call. So I'm hoping at least there was less bullying that went on during Zoom school. But I think it's about really looking at these new kids that are, in preschool, grammar school, high school, are wired differently than, let's say, our generation that created a lot of the programs and protocols for school. So it's
Right.
really looking
Absolutely.
at, which is why you see a lot more parents enrolling kids in like the Waldorf education system or Montessori or things like that, because they get a very different education than our kids in public school.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at special schools like that, there are
Mhm.
so many that are springing up, these charter schools that are everywhere. And that is a totally different type of learning.
Mhm.
But I think, and I have, where I live in the middle of nowhere, but even where I am, there are a group of parents who have sought me out and sought out some other people for more spiritual
Mhm.
coaching, as opposed to going to church and the religious
Mhm.
doctrine. And I think that's really interesting as well, is these are parents who are saying, we really want a more spiritual
Mhm.
base for our kids rather than any particular religion. So,
Yeah.
maybe I have my own thoughts about religion and none of them are very good. So I will skip that right now.
Well, I
But,
think,
but, no,
if
go
we look
ahead.
at it from a psychological perspective again, there's a lot of people who've had religious trauma that hasn't been dealt with.
Yeah,
And so, how does that then
right.
impact what you're doing now and how you're looking at things now? Because some people can't get past that trauma. Therefore, they don't want to go within because they feel like they're going to be in trouble or they're going to get yelled at or whatever the case may be. So, I think there's so many different factors in that.
Right.
Just my opinion.
Yeah. No, it's interesting how I started my quote unquote spiritual path in the 80s. And in all that time, it seems like we have taken collectively about 5 steps forward and then 3.5 back. So
Mhm.
we're always kind of revisiting things. And I think people get caught up on that too,
Mhm.
where no matter how far along your journey you are, you can still get triggered and go back to where you were, last year or, 5 years ago or last week, whenever it was. And people tend to think that they're doing something wrong, they're not doing it right, or there's something wrong with them.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, there are, spiritual teachers out there who teach the one way is the right way. And that's, not the right way for everyone. So I think when we're talking about the being one with everything, we need to explain that that's going to look different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
At its heart, it's going to look different for everyone. And whatever you find that works for you, well, that's what works for you. Congratulations, you found something that works for you. And it shouldn't be something that, well, this person said this, and a lot of followers. They have a lot of I hear that all the time. They have so many followers. I need to do what they do. No, maybe study their marketing plan. That might be advantageous. But it comes up so much lately where people are just not understanding that there is no one right way to do things.
Mm-hmm. Well, even like on Facebook and other social platforms, you see people doing readings and you compare yourself to the people who are doing those readings. And it's
Right.
like, oh my God, well, what's wrong with me? I don't do it that way, or I don't get that information,
Right.
or I'm not seeing it that way. I'm getting this. And again, if we go back to what we started talking about, based on where we are on our own path, we're each going to pick up different frequencies in a different part of the puzzle. So no two people, even if the person you're reading is sitting across from you, you're not going to give an identical reading because of how
Right.
you tune in the information that you get.
Right.
It took me a really long time.
Especially
What did you say?
Yeah, especially doing readings, because I've done readings in the past also, and you have some people, especially at like the fairs that go on, the psychic fairs, and you will see people making the rounds, and they'll go to every single person there, and always by the time they got to me, if they'd already seen 2 or 3 people, I'm like, what do I tell them? Because you are thinking, well, I don't do what they do, it's different. So yeah, definitely there's a lot of that.
I've had that as well at
Yeah.
readings. It's just like, and I'll give them conflicting information that they've just gotten. It's like, well, this person just
Right.
told me this, and I'm like, well, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm like, I don't need you to buy my services. I don't need you to do anything. I'm just trying to share with you, what's in your auric field to maybe help you move forward.
Right.
So.
And, then again, different people read different time frames as well. This person over here might be more nearsighted, meaning between now and the next 6 months. Most of my readings, unless someone asks me specifically, zone in right now, I'm looking 2-3 years in the future. I'm not telling you next week this is going to happen. And I think with fairs, a lot of that goes on because different readers, well, I see that next month this is going to happen. And when they come to me and I'm like, well, 3 years from now, you're going to, and that creates a little bit of a conflict in their minds. And it's not really a conflict. It's just a different way of readings. That's one reason I encourage people, unless you have had a whole bunch of readings and you understand how it works, and then everyone is different, just don't go to a fair and have like 6 readings in one day, because it's going to mess with your head. It just does,
It just does. I always tend to end up giving people past life information. That's not my intent when I do readings, but somehow it always enters in. Like one of their past lives will flash in my head, and I'm like, well, that's why you can't get here, and that's what's keeping you from going to this place. It's just so funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm usually not the 2 to 3 years down the road. I'm usually the now and the next 6 months and past lives.
Right. So if they went to you first and then to me, we'd probably be just right on that. We should do that.
You got your next 3 years covered.
There you go. I see a lot of angel messages too that a lot of people don't see. I have literally walked around a corner and been asking for a sign and seen an apparition, a full angel holding a sign. This is your sign. I mean, they get very, very funny with me. But and I've seen that for other people too. I've seen angelic realms doing readings that aren't really something people would think would be associated with the reading. And yet if it comes from that realm, I feel I have to give that information, or I wouldn't be receiving it. So
Mhm.
that gets a little blurry too sometimes.
Somebody said that they never knew that until the last 3 or 4 years about the importance of past lives. And I'm going to answer
Yeah.
this question more politically correct, in that it depends on what your belief system is, because not everybody believes that we have past lives. So I think
Right.
it's just whatever resonates with you. There's some people who say that's a bunch of crap, because I've had those people come to me for readings and they're like, that didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen. And then I'm like, okay, they're pretty clearly showing me it, but okay. And so I think it's, again, whatever information you hear, decide if it feels true to you, if it resonates for you.
Right.
If it doesn't, don't take it in and don't just believe it because somebody else said it. And I think that's where we need to be better consumers of what's really in our best interest, not just being lemmings and following whoever.
Right. Developing that inside yourself where you can differentiate
Mm-hmm,
between this feels right and this doesn't feel right is really important.
mm-hmm,
That's something that everyone should do a better job of. With me, if it resonates with me, I get chills. If
mm-hmm,
it's something that's coming really soon, I get chills all over.
mm-hmm,
And other times, I'll have a weird feeling in my stomach,
mm-hmm.
or I have a finger that will twitch if something is not resonating. And it is very strange, but I've done it in front of people when I've been
Yeah.
told something. And my daughter now looks at me and goes, "Oh, that's not true. Your finger's twitching." So it's everyone has that within themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
you need to develop that so that you can tell inside yourself whether it's something that is really applicable to you or not. Oh, yeah, past lives do definitely affect our current life.
If you believe in
Absolutely,
them.
they do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I personally believe they do.
yeah,
You believe they do, but there
yes.
are people out there who don't believe past lives exist. They believe that we're
You
just
know,
in the now.
yeah, one and done. Yeah. But I have a very remarkable grandson. Well, I have two of them, but my younger one is the one I'm talking about. He has changed people's minds about past lives.
Okay.
He has gone into a cemetery, walked straight to a particular grave, and said, "That's me."
Mm-hmm.
And told the exact details of who he was and what he did and how he died.
Mm-hmm.
And people standing around have looked at him like, wow, what can I say to that? So he has single-handedly, at the age of 6, changed a lot of people's minds about those kinds of things. And he's not the only one. There are tons of kids on the earth today that have done those same things.
Well,
So,
because they're still
whether
connected.
you believe or not, yeah, they're still connected. Yeah.
And so it's not until we
It's
start to
it's
go to
just something to
school.
keep an open mind about.
When we start to go to school is when we start to
Yeah.
lose some of that. But when we're just little kids, all little kids, I believe, have said things that demonstrate that we're still connected. Like I had a friend whose son said, "Mommy, I'm a boy in this life, but I've always been a girl before." And just things like
Yeah.
that. I mean, little kids know, and little kids also know as adults, who's connected and who's not. Like if you've ever watched, like little kids
Yeah.
around me just start looking over my head at the show that's going on. But like at my friends and stuff,
Yeah.
they'll just look at them like in the face. But me, they're always watching above because they can see all the stuff that's above my head swirling that most adults can't see. Same with animals. I have that effect on
Right.
animals too. Animals just stare at me a lot.
Yeah. I have a friend who refuses to ever go camping with me again because of some of our experiences with wild animals. And in fact, she's told other people, don't ever go camping with her. It's a bad idea. It's just, I had a mountain lion come up to the campfire one night.
Mm-hmm.
There's people sitting around it, and here comes this mountain lion sitting down like he's a house cat. And then he starts purring, and I'm like, okay. Nice, kitty. But yeah, kids and animals they always know what's going on.
And you always like
That's another.
see pets like barking at nothing, but they're not barking at nothing. They're seeing in a different dimension or seeing in a different frequency. So they are barking at something. We just can't see it or aren't. Well, I usually can see what they're barking at, but
I usually see it. Yeah, yeah, I usually see it. Which is, altogether a different thing. I've seen things my entire life, but I've known people who had started seeing things maybe even in their 20s and 30s, and they never did before. They would feel things, they would sense things, but they didn't actually see things. And the first time they saw things, they're on the phone with me screaming, "What did I just do?" And it just, if you're open to it and you are in a calm, accepting space inside yourself, it's amazing what you can see. But a lot of times we don't have that calmness, we don't have that stillness within us. And a lot of times, at least I believe, a lot of times they sense our fear and they will know, oh, I probably should leave this one alone right now. And that's why a lot of people who should be able to see things that they just don't.
Well, and I know that one of the things we talked about talking about today, and I think this is a really good segment to it, is like we're talking about the concept of death doulas and near-death experiences. Because I think, sorry, my work phone is ringing off the hook. I don't know what that's about, but just interesting. I just think that it's so connected because people who are super sensitive also have a feeling around people who are transitioning. And you can see sometimes they're transport angels, or you can see their spirit teams that are working with them, or you can see the people on the other side waiting for them. And so it's just such an interesting concept.
It is. And I've had 2 near-death experiences. And I know after the first one, I was very different for a long time. And I felt like, well, why didn't they keep me? I wanted to stay, so I sort of became a daredevil. That was my one and only skydiving, even because I had no fear. I was just going to get back there. And I literally had someone from the other side tell me, it is not your time. We needed to do some upgrades. And I'm like, what am I, a car? You're upgrading my system. What is this? I'm a computer now. And I literally felt a whoosh and it's just calm. And I lost all of that daredevil tendency. And then about 20 years later, I had my second near-death experience. And I knew I was going, and I had called a death doula to be with me because I was convinced they were keeping me this time. And she came in and said, there's nothing for me to do here. And I said, they're throwing me back again. And she said, And I thought, how perceptive of her to know that her services really were not needed at that time. But I keep in touch with her, and her process has been very interesting. When she was a child, her gift, I know we all have gifts, her gift was being able to see when people were going to transition. I don't know that I would want that gift.
I have that gift when people are sick. I know the exact date and time they're going to transition.
Yeah. My daughter does too. That's not a gift I would want. I have enough that cause me trouble already. But what an interesting choice of career to begin with. A death doula. And then in her case, she'd always had that ability. So for her, it was sort of a natural, transition to become a death doula. But I've known other people who have taken that career path after losing someone very, very close to them.
Mhm.
And they've decided, death can be beautiful. And this is what they wanted to do for other people. So have you known a death doula?
I've never known one, but for a while, my friends nicknamed me the Angel of Death because, like, I had a lot of friends who died, and I knew exactly when they were going to die and what they were waiting for, and especially with my own family. Like, I know when my grandmother was transitioning, I told hospice what she was waiting for. They leaned over, whispered it to her, and an hour and a half later, she transitioned. And with my mother, and I don't know, I don't know, I think I've talked to you about the story, and it's in my last book, but or one of my books, is that when my mother was dying, we took her back to the hospital. Everyone came and said goodbye, and we couldn't get the meds regulated. She was in so much pain. We didn't have a choice to do that, and so she hated the music, and they had music piping in like on the sides of the bed. So first I shut that off. Everyone had left, and I went back after dinner. And my great aunt reached down for her, and my mother said, "I'm not going with her here," meaning me. And then I was told that she will be transitioning at 9:03 p.m. So at 10 to 9, I left my mom's room knowing that that was going to be the last time I saw my mom alive. And I really wanted to run back up there, but I knew that she would have just prolonged it again if I did that. And I didn't want that for her. So, I mean, I saw it all anyway. I saw my great aunt reach down for her, and I saw my mother go at the 9:03. And then I just sat and waited. And then they called at 9:45 and, said, your mother's no longer with us. She transitioned. And, but I would always have a death dream 3 weeks before somebody would die for my family, down to I was sitting in the funeral and what color the casket would be. And like with my grandfather's, my brother picked the color of the casket. I would have had no way of knowing. He's like, he always drove silver cars. Let's get him a silver casket. So in the dream, it was silver. So, it was such I didn't realize at the time, but I would have these deja vu moments. And I'd be like, I feel like I've been here before. And so then I started to realize that I was, having dreams about all this stuff, and then it would happen. And I'd be like, yes, I have been here before. I saw it all before. So it's such an interesting thing.
It's a really interesting thing. I have a lot. Well, I have a huge family. I had a huge family, not so much anymore. My grandmother had 11 sisters and one brother. That poor boy. But I think we were in the grocery store. No, we weren't. We were in a clothing store. And she put both of her hands on the clothing rack and she went, "Oh, Mabel, bye." And at that exact instant, her oldest sister passed away. And I was a little kid. And I thought, whoa, that was trippy, And it was just in my family, everybody has kind of felt, that we are all connected. And my family now is much, much, much smaller and not very close at all. In fact, I am officially the rainbow sheep of the family. But it was so ingrained in my grandmother that she would cousins, her uncle, anyone, when they would get close to dying, she would just know. And she would always close her eyes and kind of shake. And I always said, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I'm helping them leave." And she never explained that. So I don't know what she was really doing. But the gesture that she did, I was like, whoa, my grandmother just teleported, to another dimension. But, different families are different. And mine has a very, very long history in being drummed out of various churches for witchcraft and moonshining. So, that's just who she was. I've talked to other families, my ex's family, they were literally Berkeley hippies in the 60s. Literally, that's what they were. And they had a very, very different view of things, where they didn't necessarily outwardly express that they could see things or feel things or clairvoyance or whatever. You could look at them during certain times and you could tell. When his grandmother passed away, we were sitting at the funeral and we saw this white mist go across from the coffin out the stained glass window. And my ex sister-in-law, she said, "Bye, Grandma." Like it was nothing, like it happened every day, all the time. So that's kind of when I knew, yeah, there's more going on there than they were willing to admit. Now, my family was always, whatever, in the middle of the street. They didn't care who thought what. But other families are quite conservative, and they do care a lot about what people think. My entire life, I tell people, it is my goal to get out of this life without being burned at the stake. But, other people have a different view on all that.
I was
your family very open?
No. Not at all. But I have two experiences. I always have a hard time at funerals, not that the person has died, but the person leaves in the middle of their funeral. It's like they stick around. You can feel them on this plane until their funeral, because they're still kind of that human and they want to see who came and what happened. Right. And so I always start crying in the middle of the funeral, and everyone's like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "Because they just left. I saw them go." Right. And then I was on the phone with a friend of mine and I threw my hands up in the air, and all of a sudden I went, "Woohoo." And I'm like, "My uncle just transitioned." She's like, "Well, that's a really strange reaction." And I'm like, "Well, but here's the story around it." And then like 10 minutes later, my dad called me to tell me that my uncle died. But I'm like, I already know. He was so happy because he was born in France, and his parents were killed in the Holocaust. And he was gotten out of France and taken to Switzerland. And then he was adopted into our family. And then he was adopted into my mom's family. And then he married my dad's sister. But just really interesting dynamics. But he got to see his parents again, who he hadn't seen since he was like 5 years old. He was so happy. I saw this like little boy running around in like Bermuda shorts, just ecstatic to be with these people again. And my friend's like, "Okay, I guess that makes sense." But it's not a lot of people, once they cross over, they're at peace, and there's a homecoming for them that they sometimes are excited about. So I think that it's just what your experience is. When my dad died, and I was waiting all night because I knew I was just waiting for the phone call. But at 4:00 in the morning, my entire room lit up like the horizon. I'm like, "Bye, Dad." I knew the exact moment he died. And so, and sometimes people call it a blessing and sometimes people call it a curse. It's not always easy to know that. I know that one of my good friends, when she was dying, her husband and son asked me when I thought she was going to transition. And I said, "It's Thursday or Friday, but I think it's Thursday. And I think it's going to be sometime in the morning." And then she died at 11:11. So, it's sometimes helpful to know. Like, I had a coworker whose father was dying, and I'm like, "You have to get an earlier flight." And she's like, "Why?" I'm like, "You're not going to make it back to Louisiana from Chicago to see your dad before he dies." And then I wrote a message. I said, "Don't open this till you get home." And she didn't. She didn't make it home, but she knew she wasn't going to. And then she opened the message and she's like, "Oh my God, this is exactly what my dad used to say to me." And then I had another coworker. It's
wow.
fun to do this stuff, work in a Catholic hospital and be giving people these messages. I had another coworker whose aunt was transitioning, and she's like, well, I'm just gonna finish my shift. I'm like, no, you don't understand. You have to go to the hospital now. If you want to see your aunt alive, you need to be there in the next half hour. We'll figure out work, but you need to go. And she's like, no, it's going to be fine. I'm like, I am telling you, she's waiting for you. She can't wait that much longer. So you really need to go.
Yeah.
And she finally did. And she's like, thank you. Because she got there before she transitioned. So she got to say goodbye. But, it's sometimes you give the people the messages and they don't believe you. And I'm like, I'm not just saying this to say it. I'm obviously being told this to help you, not to hurt you. And I know this is hard. Like I had to, in my family, since we don't talk about death or anything else, I had to tell my dad, my brother, and my uncle, you need to say goodbye and you need to tell her she can go. So they're like, no, she's not that close. And I'm like, please have that conversation with her.
Sometimes people don't want to know.
With both my parents, it's funny. I made their funeral arrangements before they died because I knew I had 3 days before they died. And I prefer to make them before while the person's still here. It's easier for me than having to make choices like the day of. Because in the Jewish tradition, you usually bury people within 24 to 48 hours. So usually right after you go to the chapel and you make all the arrangements. And I'm in no state of mind at that time. So I very clearly picked things for my mom. And he's like, you are so calm about this. I'm like, I know exactly when it's going to happen. I'm like, what? I might as well just do it now. And then I had to do it all by my uncle went with me after she died when we made the final arrangements. But for my mom, my dad, I think my brother went with me this time. But for my mom, I picked out everything before by myself and just said, this is what we're going to want. So, again, gift or curse. Did it make getting those phone calls any easier? No, I was waiting up all night for those phone calls. And I still burst into hysterics when the calls came, even though I knew it was coming.
Yep, you are never prepared.
Yeah. So, anything else you want to say around this subject? Because we're kind of getting to that time.
I'm good. I mean, we could talk for days on this subject, but
carry it on again next week. So. We can keep talking about
it. No, I'm good. I was gonna, because usually we have people with questions and we don't really have questions this time.
That's because we're doing it earlier. We screwed up everybody's schedule.
That's probably true. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, then we will.
No, I'm
You're okay to end?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and end the live broadcast, and then we will see you guys all back for our normal time next week, which is closer to 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. And see you all next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.